We are never again getting a production company called Amazing Movies. It's a crying shame. Hey Death Trippers, and welcome to the third volume of Deathtalk Trailers. Thanks for joining us once again. We're going to get stuck right in here with the trailer for an auteur piece, Uninvited, which is written, produced and directed by the schlockmaster Graydon Clark. Released or maybe unleashed in 1987, Uninvited sees a group of unlikable kids board a luxury yacht that's owned by a billionaire crime boss who's played by Airwolf's Alex Cord, who incidentally is having a fucking great time in this movie. The gang are on their way to the Cayman Islands, the kids want to party and the gangsters want to escape from the cops, but it all goes to the shit thanks to the arrival of a seemingly ordinary household cat that's escaped some sort of nondescript biohazard chemical factory. As the voyage continues, they all fall foul of the Moggy mutant as it spreads a grisly, body-busting parasite throughout its victims. This results in some very gross but very funny gore effects. It's honestly one of those movies that only works if you just allow yourself to accept every single decision every character makes. The story's narrative and its progression is so messy and illogical. This does make for a really entertaining watch, at least for the first 2/3, but by the last act the comedy steam kind of runs out of the film and you kind of want it over.
What are you laughing at? You're gonna die.
It's not all bad though, the gore effects are fun, the characters are universally awful, and as I said, Cord is having a marvellous time. Shari Shattuck's in the mix, no problems there, and George Kennedy and Clu Gulager throw off all of their dramatic inhibitions to just accept the chaos that surrounds them. Oh, the production team also seemingly only has one meow effect, which it loops incessantly whenever the kit is on the screen. Uninvited can also be found under the title Killer Cat, but for me it will always be Gory Garfield. This is a short TV spot for 1976 Bruceploitation movie Bruce Lee His Last Days, also known as Bruce Lee and I. The film sees Hong Kong megastar Danny Lee portray the martial arts legend in an incredibly loose retelling of the actor's mysterious final days. The film also stars Taiwanese actor Betty Ting Pei, within whose apartment Bruce Lee's body was found in July of 1973. Ting Pei not only plays herself, but also acts as producer on the movie, one of a slew of films rushed to production to capitalise on Lee's untimely demise. Director David Cronenberg had already introduced his brand of gross invasive gore to the world via Shivers in 1975, but it wasn't until 2 years later when he really made his mark as a body horror specialist, shall we say, with the release of this film, Rabid, which Cronenberg wrote and directed in 1977. You probably don't need me to give you much introduction to this flick, but Rabid is the story of a young woman, Rose, who undergoes experimental graft surgery after being involved in a motorcycle accident with her boyfriend. The surgery causes a strange sort of phallic prong to grow from her armpit, which she then uses to feed on the blood of other humans, with these humans then mutating into ravenous psychotic loons. Rabid. Rabid cements a lot of the themes that Cronenberg goes on to use for most of his career: invasive parasites, experimental medical practices, deadly sexual encounters. It also has an all-in approach to nihilism as an inherent consequence of human behaviour, typically the behaviour of humans who are attempting to rise above their station. Cronenberg's original casting choice for Rose was Sissy Spacek, but studio executives refused because they didn't like her Texas accent. The executive producer of Rabid, Ivan Reitman, then pointed Cronenberg to the dearly departed Marilyn Chambers, who was looking to segue from sex films into more mainstream movie making, or at least as mainstream as Rabid gets. Spacek would instead audition for Brian De Palma's Carrie, so it all worked out in the end, and ironically you can see a poster for Carrie in the background of one of the scenes of Rabid. Critics were very unkind to the film on release, although at the time it was the highest grossing Canadian movie ever, pulling in around $1 million at the box office. Of course, it's now considered an all-time horror classic, and although it's certainly flawed, it has some great set pieces and some stark, unsettling images, such as this one right at the end of the trailer, which is probably my favourite shot of all of Cronenberg's work. Good times. This is the very short TV spot for the abysmal 1975 British horror film The Devil Within Her, directed by Peter Sasti. This terrible movie has a pregnant burlesque dancer, played by Joan Collins, give birth to a possessed baby after being cursed by a fellow performer. Her terror tyke is born and immediately begins letting rip with some sub-exorcist shenanigans. The film is also known as The Monster, I Don't Want to Be Born, and Sharon's Baby, even though Colin's character is actually called Lucy. It's terrible stuff, but it's endlessly entertaining. It has a cast of familiar faces, including Ralph Bates, Eileen Atkins and Donald Pleasance, and a ton of awful 70s British travelogue footage. But despite all this monster baby silliness, perhaps the film's most demonic decision is to ship Caroline Munro with John Steiner. This is one of my favourite movies. This is 1974's Sister Street Fighter, directed by Kazuhiko Yamaguchi, and starring the pint-sized princess of punch-ups, Etsuko Shiomi, who's anglicised in the West as Sue Shiomi. This batshit crazy action-adventure is an indirect spin-off from Sonny Chiba's awesomely silly Street Fighter series, and it sees Shiomi, who was a real-life martial arts protege of Chiba, kick off her own movie career with a wild, unpredictable and very, very violent franchise. This first film in the series has Shiomi investigate the disappearance of her brother, who's a Hong Kong drug agent who vanishes while investigating a seemingly innocent corporation, which is actually a front for a drug smuggling operation. While that sounds like a fairly standard setup for this kind of action thriller, what Sister Street Fighter and Shiomi bring to the genre is a completely wild and ever-evolving clash of tone and style and character. So this movie and its sequels bounce around action and... oh, hang on, wait a minute. There we go. Bounce around action and comedy and incredibly wrought melodrama and really horrible violence. But they also have this lurid, like happy-go-lucky comic book visual style and like dizzying cinematography. So one moment the film's playing it straight like a Bruce Lee epic, and the next moment it segues into an X-rated Batman 66 episode. It has an almost narcotic effect on the viewer and is just as addictive, to be honest. Of course, front and centre is Shiomi and her double-fisted, spunky fighting style. It makes her magnetic and engaging and thoroughly likeable, while all her opponents are queued up to be slaughtered like video game bosses. They've all got wacky costumes and over-the-top gimmicks. Sonny Chiba shows up in the first movie to help boost his pal's box office success. Shiomi herself would go on to star in several follow-ups and a glut of other action comedies. All of her films generally contain this car crash tone, as well as her martial arts skills and complete inability to rescue anyone in danger. Shiomi's movies are living video games, and in that environment she's the perfect protagonist. I fucking love her, and it's movies like this that give me life. And that'll do it for Deathtalk Trailers. Thanks for watching the video. Please like, share and subscribe. And remember, Death Trippers, just watch the best bits.